Okay, where did you see blood at?
On the pillows and the cups and on the bed. And then I started crying, but I tried to call 911. Ran here.
You ran?
As fast as I could.
The boy you're hearing is just 4 years old. 1 hour before this recording, he was playing with his grandpa. 1 hour later, he was covered in blood. He showed up alone at a daycare in rural Ohio, pajamas soaked and shaking. "My grandparents are melting," he whispered. No one could understand what he meant until police walked into the quiet farmhouse and found 2 bodies in bed, murdered in cold blood. The killer thought he got away, but what he didn't know was that the only witness was hiding under the covers, eyes wide open, watching everything, before the sirens, before the police, before the headlines. There was just a little boy in his pajamas, waking up to another ordinary day on the farm. His name was Dameon Huffman, 4 years old, bright-eyed, and gentle. The kind of kid who called frogs his friends and thought pancakes were magic. He lived on a 40-acre patch of land in Bradford, Ohio, a quiet, green town where life moved slow and neighbors still waved at each other from their porches. Dameon didn't live with his mom full-time. Instead, he was raised by his great-grandparents, Jack and Linda Myers, a couple with wide hearts and warm hands who had stepped in without hesitation when Dameon was born. Amber, Dameon's mother, had been just a teenager when she gave birth. She loved her son fiercely, but life hadn't yet handed her the tools to raise him alone. Jack and Linda, already past middle age but still full of energy, did what they had always done best. They opened their home and made room for one more. That house, that land, that family, it wasn't perfect, but it was full of love. They were my parents in every way that mattered. Amber would later say, "I lived with Grandma and Grandpa, 'cause that's just the kind of people they were." Dameon remembered years later. Kind, loving, always there. Jack and Dameon were best friends. They'd ride the old tractor together through the fields, Jack laughing at Dameon's wide-eyed wonder as they made loops around the barn. Jack taught him how to feed the chickens and how to collect warm eggs in the early morning. Linda, on the other hand, ruled the kitchen. Her cooking wasn't just good, it was sacred. Sunday dinners brought everyone together. You could smell the biscuits and fried chicken before you even got to the porch, and everyone came. Cousins, stepkids, grandkids. It didn't matter who shared whose blood. In the Myers family, everyone was welcome at the table. You didn't say step or half or anything like that. One relative later said, "We were just family. That's how they raised us." To a 4-year-old boy, this world was all he knew and all he needed. And soon, things were about to get even better. Amber, now a young woman with a stable job in her own home just 30 minutes away, was finally ready to raise Dameon full-time. The plan was set. After finishing preschool, Dameon would move in with her and start kindergarten in a new school. A new chapter. A fresh start. But they never got that far. Because just weeks before the move, on March 27, 2003, the unimaginable happened. IT started with a phone call. At 9:15 a.m., the 911 dispatcher in Dark County, Ohio, answered a call from a daycare center. A preschool teacher was online, voice shaky, panic rising. "A little boy just arrived. He's covered in blood." Covered in blood. In pajamas. Alone. It was Dameon. And when they asked him what happened, he said something no one could understand. "My grandparents are melting." At first, the teachers thought maybe he was hurt. Maybe he fell. Maybe it wasn't even blood. But when they saw the look in his eyes, they knew something terrible had happened. The daycare immediately went into lockdown. Cops were dispatched to the Myers farmhouse. Officers didn't know what they'd find. A medical emergency? A break-in? But what they found instead would shake their small town to its core. The front door of the house was wide open. The kitchen was silent. The bedroom door creaked as they pushed it open. And there, lying motionless in bed, were Jack and Linda Myers. Shot execution style, while they slept. Jack had a gunshot wound to the back of his head. Blood pooled around his mouth and nose. Linda had been shot in the face. She tried to defend herself. A bullet had passed through her hand. They were still warm to the touch. It hadn't been long. The killer was gone, but not by much. Back at the daycare, Dameon was now under police protection. No one could figure out how this little boy had survived, or why he had run over a mile, barefoot and terrified, just to get help. No one could explain what melting meant, and no one knew if Dameon had seen the killer. But the boy wasn't talking. Meanwhile, Amber, now living on her own and expecting her son home soon, got a knock at the door. 2 detectives, and one sentence that would change her life forever. Jack and Linda are gone. Amber collapsed. "And Dameon," she cried. She thought they meant her son was dead too. But Dameon was alive, hidden from his family, protected by police, the only living witness to a double murder, and possibly the only person who could identify the killer. What no one knew at the time was that Dameon hadn't just walked in after the murders. He had been there. He had seen it all. And deep in the back of his young mind, behind all the confusion and fear, was one horrifying image he would later share. A stranger in a green jumpsuit, standing in his bedroom doorway, holding a shotgun, and staring right at him. The morning of March 27th, 2003, started like any other, but inside a quiet farmhouse in Bradford, Ohio, something unimaginable had already happened. While the rest of the town was waking up, sipping coffee, and heading to work, a 4-year-old boy was running for his life, covered in blood, in his pajamas, with no shoes. Dameon Huffman didn't know where else to go, only that he had to get away from the house, away from what he'd just seen, and away from the man in green. He ran for over a mile down the road, past cornfields and empty barns, all the way to the only place he knew would be open, his preschool. When he walked through the doors, everyone froze. His face was pale, his hands trembling, his clothes soaked with something dark and sticky. At first, the teachers didn't believe what they were seeing. Then he spoke. "My grandparents are melting." Those words, strange, haunting, and innocent, were the only way a 4-year-old could describe what he had seen. Police were called immediately. Officers sped down the winding road toward the Myers family farm, not knowing if they were walking into a tragedy or something far worse. The farmhouse stood still. The front door was wide open. The wind pushed against the screen door like it was trying to warn them not to enter. Inside, the kitchen was quiet. No breakfast smells. No voices. They called out, "Anybody home?" No answer. Slow camera pan visual. Hallway into bedroom. Door creaking open. In the master bedroom, the scene was every first responder's nightmare. Jack Myers lay still, face down, a gunshot wound in the back of his head. Blood trailed from his mouth and nose, soaking into the pillows. Linda Myers was beside him, shot directly in the face. Her hand, riddled with shrapnel, had likely come up in a last-second attempt to shield herself. They never had a chance. Officers swept the house, room by room, guns drawn. Was the killer still inside? Was this a robbery gone wrong? A family member? A stranger? They didn't know yet. But one thing was already clear. This wasn't random. There were no signs of forced entry. No drawers pulled open. Nothing missing. In fact, things were untouched. Purses, credit cards, cash on the table, expensive electronics, still sitting exactly where they were left. That ruled out a break-in. This wasn't about money. This was personal. Someone had walked into that house with one goal: kill Jack and Linda Myers. And whoever it was, they had planned it. They had come while the couple was sleeping, shot them in bed, left without disturbing a thing, and disappeared. Back at the preschool, Dameon was still silent. He was under police protection now, not allowed to see his mother, not allowed to go home, because if the killer knew Dameon had survived, he might come back. Amber, his mother, didn't even know where he was. When she opened the door to the detective that day, she had no idea what she was about to hear. "We're sorry," they said. "Jack and Linda are gone." Her legs gave out. "And Dameon," she screamed. She thought he was gone too. As the crime scene photos were taken and the farmhouse sealed off, the entire town began to panic. News spread fast. Double murder. Execution style. child survivor. A killer was out there, maybe hiding, maybe watching, and the only person who might have seen anything was 4 years old. Dameon didn't speak for hours, but when detectives finally sat with him, something changed. He began to draw, not pictures of monsters or nightmares, but rooms, hallways, people. One drawing showed a tall green figure. Another showed 2 people in a bed, with red scribbles across their faces. They tried speaking to him gently. They asked about the morning. What did he hear? What did he see? Slowly, he began to talk. "I was sleeping," he said, but then the door clicked. His bedroom door had opened. At first, he thought it was his grandparents. But it wasn't. It was a green monster, he whispered. He had a big gun. Detectives froze. This wasn't imagination. A child couldn't fake this kind of detail. He described the footsteps, the way he peeked from under the covers, the way the man looked around and left the room. Dameon didn't scream. He didn't run. He just closed his eyes and waited. The next thing he remembered was seeing his grandparents in bed, not moving, blood on the sheets, blood on their faces, melting. In his panic, Dameon tried to help. He grabbed a tissue, tried to clean his grandfather's face, but nothing worked. He reached for the phone. Click. Silence. The line was dead. The killer had cut it. Dameon looked outside. He saw the road. He remembered his daycare, and he started running. That testimony alone made this case anything but ordinary. Police were no longer looking for a burglar. They were hunting a killer who had murdered 2 people in cold blood and let a child live. Or worse, didn't know the child was there at all. And that meant one thing. Dameon's life was in danger. More would come. A shotgun pulled from a river, a green jumpsuit in a trash bag, a family member hiding secrets. But for now, one thing was terrifyingly clear. A killer had walked into a house full of love, left nothing but silence, and almost got away. Almost. In the hours following the murders, fear settled over Bradford like a heavy fog. A beloved couple was dead, a child had survived, and a killer was on the loose. Everyone wanted answers, but the case was already growing cold. There were no fingerprints, no clear motive, no signs of forced entry or a struggle. Whoever had done this had done it fast, had done it clean, and had vanished without a trace. Or so they thought. The first theory was obvious, a burglary gone wrong. But that theory was shattered almost instantly. Officers found everything intact. Cash, jewelry, purses, electronics. Nothing had been touched. Even drawers weren't opened. There was no reason to think this was random. Someone knew Jack and Linda. Someone wanted them gone. But who? Investigators began with the people closest of family. Relatives, neighbors, longtime friends. But no one stood out. That is, until they spoke to John, a longtime neighbor of the Myers, and a man who had grown up with the family. John seemed nervous, and he had something to say. "You should talk to Gregg," he told them. Gregg Myers, Jack's own son from his first marriage, a name no one had expected to hear. Gregg wasn't just close to Jack. He had been the best man at Jack's wedding to Linda. He was part of the farm, part of the family. Friendly, polite, no criminal history. To most, he was the least likely suspect in the world. But to John, something didn't feel right. Investigators brought Gregg in for questioning. He was emotional, upset, said his stomach had been hurting all day. He cried. He cooperated. He asked to help. And when asked about his whereabouts that morning, he had an alibi. "I was at work," he said, 30 miles away. He even had a stamped timesheet to prove it. Not only that, his shoe size was 2 sizes bigger than the footprints found near the house. Nothing pointed to Gregg. Nothing yet. Back at the station, detectives were stuck. No physical evidence. No solid leads. And then, they remembered something. Dameon. He had told them about the green jumpsuit. The green monster with a big gun, a shotgun. And so, police went looking. 5 miles from the Myers' home, in the Stillwater River, they found it. A 12-gauge shotgun buried under river rock. The serial number had been filed off. Someone didn't want it traced, but they didn't file it well enough. Forensics restored the number, and what they found next was stunning. Police pulled old newspaper ads. Classifieds where locals' Gregg was brought in again. This time, detectives were direct. They asked about the inheritance. They asked if losing the farm was too much. He denied it, still polite, still composed. But the mask was cracking, and the case wasn't over. Divers were sent back to the Stillwater River, hoping to find more. They did. A black trash bag, tied shut, floating just beneath the surface. Inside, a green jumpsuit, latex gloves, shotgun shells, and a pair of tennis shoes, the same size as the prints left near the house, 2.5 sizes smaller than Gregg's normal shoes. But the gloves? They had fingerprints. One matched Gregg Myers, the man who had cried in the interview room, the man who'd once sat beside his father as best man, now stood accused of killing him for money and a farm. When the arrest came, no one could believe it. Gregg. It couldn't be, but it was. And all because a child, too young to even understand what murder was, remembered the color green and chose to speak. April 2004, just over 1 year since the murders. The courtroom in Dark County was packed. Family members sat in silence. Old friends held their breath. And at the center of it all sat Gregg Myers, charged with the execution-style murder of his own father and stepmother, wearing a suit, eyes low, no tears. The same man who once held Dameon in his lap at family dinners. The same man who had stood smiling in wedding photos beside his dad, now faced 2 counts of aggravated murder. The evidence was overwhelming. The shotgun, the gloves, the shoes, the motive, and one more thing, the voice of a 4-year-old boy. Dameon didn't testify in person. He was too young, too fragile, but his words, spoken softly during interviews while playing with dolls in model houses, were enough. His story never changed. The man, the jumpsuit, the gun, and the moment he opened his eyes just a crack and saw the green monster standing at the foot of his bed. The jury deliberated for just a few hours. Then the verdict came down. Guilty on all counts. Gregg Myers was sentenced to 2 life terms in prison without the possibility of parole. The room stayed quiet. No celebration. No cheering. Because justice, though served, doesn't undo the damage. It doesn't bring Jack and Linda back. It doesn't erase the trauma Dameon carries. It doesn't rebuild the trust shattered in a family. But it was something. And for Amber, Dameon's mother, it was a beginning of healing. In the weeks after the trial, Dameon was finally released from protective custody. After over a year apart, he got to go home. Not to farm, but to his mother's home. Just like they had planned before everything fell apart. He was finally mine again, Amber would later say. I can't put into words what that was like. Dameon started kindergarten that fall, a little boy who had already seen more than most do in a lifetime. Today, Dameon Huffman is a grown man. He's 22 years old. He graduated from high school. He works hard, and he's still surrounded by a family who loves him deeply. He doesn't speak publicly about what happened, but those who know him say he is kind, resilient, strong, just like Jack, just like Linda. The best parts of his grandparents live on in him. Their legacy isn't just a story of loss. It's a story of survival, of a child who refused to be silent, of detectives who refused to give up, of a mother who waited over a year just to hold her son again, and of the quiet power of a memory, a green jumpsuit, a whisper of footsteps, a door clicking in the dark. That's what solved this case. Not high-tech labs, not surveillance footage, just the courage of a little boy who saw something no child should ever see, and chose to tell the truth. This story doesn't end in celebration, but it ends in justice. And sometimes that's the most powerful thing of all.